So you have a Shopify store and you also want to sell your products to countries that don't speak your language. So say for example, you're from France and you're selling something like, I don't know, like if. So some people might not know what that means. So you'll have to translate that to a language that they know of. Or should I say, know if? It's a quality joke. So good. So what do? You create a language switcher that'll allow your customer to switch from one language to another. But the problem is, how do you do that? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a language switcher like this without using or installing Shopify apps. Stay tuned for that. So let's start off this video by opening our development store. So I have here my countdown timer. I created that in a previous video. So if you want to learn how to create this, I will put the link in the video description below, or you can just check the checkbox or the what do you call that? The eye icon at the top. I don't know what you call that, but whatever. Let's just continue. Let's open our admin page, and here in the online store page, let's open that, and let's open the actions and select edit code. And while we're waiting for that, let me just honestly change my hat because I think I look kind of stupid with this hat. There you go. Alright, so here in the code editor, let's open the theme.liquid. And what we're going to do is to create a new section. So let's just close the templates folder. Let's open the sections folder, create a new section, and let's just call it language-switcher. And we can just get rid of everything. We don't need the schema tags or the style sheet or script tags. So what we're going to do here is to create a form tag first, because later on we're going to create the button to change the language from one language to another, obviously. So let's create a form tag. So form, and then make sure that you end this form. So end form, and then we're going to pass the localization parameters. So make sure that you add single quotes, and then inside of this type localization. And then we're going to set its ID to something like, let me just add an ID here. And we're going to call this localization, and then form, and then tag. Then we can also add a class for this form. So we can just add a class, and we can just give it a class of drop up. And inside of this form, we're going to create the button. So let's just create a button tag. So button. And then we're going to give this a class of local button, btn. And then we'll set it to disabled, because I don't want to click it. If I click it, the form will be sent. You don't want that. So we can just close this button. And then in this button, we'll just add a text called localization for now. We're going to customize this later on. And then underneath of this button tag, we'll just create a div. And we'll give it a class of drop up content. Make sure that you close the div. And in this div, we're going to loop through the locales that is installed or published in a Shopify store. So to do that, we're going to create a for tag. So for, let's just create a tag and then type end for. And then for the other one, for the first one, let's type for. And then the condition is for each locale in shop. So shop is an object, and then inside of that object there's an attribute called published underscore locales. So published locales is an attribute of shop object, and inside of this attribute there's a list of languages that the store use. Oh hey guys, this is Bernard, future Bernard at your service. So I just want to mention that the published languages, you can find that on your settings, and then the store languages, and you should have the following store languages. So basically the shop object contains the published languages attribute, and that attribute is basically this published languages. So inside of this object or attribute, you have the French, Japanese, and the default language, which is English. So if you want to add a new language, you can just click the add language button, and then you can select a new language. And then once you have selected a new language, you can just click add. And then once you have clicked the add, you should be able to publish a new language. It should be right over here, the right side of the language. So yeah, let's just go back to the video. So we can check that by going here in our for loop, and we can just create, say for example, an anchor tag. So an anchor tag, we can just give it an href of, say for example, just a number sign symbol. And inside of this anchor tag, we're going to use the local object. and we're going to use the attribute called endonym underscore name. So basically, the endonym attribute will give you the text or the name of the language in the form of the official language. So say for example, the language Japanese. In Japanese, it's called Nihongo. So the endonym name will give you the characters of the word Nihongo. Another example is French. So in French, they call their language Français or French. No, it's Français. What is the word for the French? Yeah, I need to learn more. And then if we open the theme.liquid, and if we scroll down all the way down until the end of the body tag, we can just use that section by using the section tag, obviously. So let's just create a section tag. So section. And we'll just select that by typing the name of the section. So language hyphen switcher. And we can save this. And if we open our online store, hit refresh. And if we scroll down, we should have the following languages. So I have English, I have Francais, and then the language Japanese or the characters for Nihongo. So there you have it. We now have the languages. The next thing we're going to do is just to create a style for the button and then for the anchor tags, and just put it right over here at the bottom right of the screen or of the website. So we can just go back to the code editor and let's open the assets folder, create a new asset, and select create a blank file. Let's just call it lang-switcher. Yeah, that's fine. Click add asset. What we're going to do is to use that CSS file in our theme.liquid. So let's just scroll back up, and we should have the following style sheet tags and JavaScript tag. And then what we're going to do is just to copy the same tag or same object that we created in the previous lesson and just paste it underneath and change the string value to language lang-switcher.css. So we have the asset URL filter and then the style sheet tag. So basically the asset URL filter will look for the following lang switcher CSS inside of the asset folder, and then the result or the response of this filter will be passed to the style sheet tag, and they'll generate a style sheet tag. So we can just save this, and we can just open our storefront or our online store page. We can just refresh that, and if we open the inspect elements, we should have the lang switcher here. So lang switcher, there it goes, lang switcher. I don't know why I misspelled that. It's supposed to be lang switcher. Switcher, there you go. Hit save. Let's go back to our storefront, hit refresh, and we should have that lang switcher CSS. There you go. So we can just go back to the code editor, and here in the lang-switcher.css, let's just select the drop up class first. And here we're going to set its position to relative, so relative. And then next up, we need to set its display to inline block, so inline block. So next up, we need to style up our local button, so it should be local btn. And in this class, we're going to set its background color. My keyboard is so bad right now. I have a new keyboard and it's just so bad. I have to get a new one. And then background color, and then we'll just set it to something like 3498 dB. I don't know, I got that online. And then next up, we need to set its color to white. So just white. And next up, we need to set its padding to something like 15 pixels. And we can also set its font size to something like 20 pixels. And then for the position, we need to set it to fixed, so it'll be aligned at the bottom. And then we're going to set its top or bottom to something like 25 pixels, and the right, we'll set it to 25 pixels. Let's just save this. Let's open our browser, hit refresh, and we should have the following localization button. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is just to give the localization button a style. So when we hover this button, it should give us the list of languages that we can select or we can click on. So we can just go back to the code editor, and the next class that we're going to select is the drop up content. So drop up content. So first we need to set its display to none, because we don't want that to be displayed as soon as we open our page. We only want to display that once we hover the button. So we can just set it to none. And then the next class that we're going to select is the local btn. Make sure that you're using the hover, and then we're going to select the drop up content, and we're going to set its display to block. So we can just close this. Let's try and save this. Let's open our browser or your online store, just refresh that, and then let's just scroll down here, and it should be not displayed. So when we hover the localization button, alright, so it's not honestly working for some reason. Let's just honestly go back to the customizer or code editor, and I think it's supposed to be drop up. So drop up, and then we can just save this. Let's open our home page, hit refresh. Let's try to hover that. There you go. As you can see now, when we hover the button, it's displaying the languages at the bottom left of the screen. I hope you can see that. So let's just continue, and let's just move the content over there at the bottom or at the top of the button. So below the display none, let's just set its position to fixed, and we're going to set its bottom to 80% or 80 pixels, and we'll also set its right to 25 pixels. And next up, we can also set its minimum height to something like 110 pixels, and we need to set its z-index to 1 to make sure that it's hovering the button. We can just save this. Let's open our browser, and if we hover the button, there you go. As you can see now, we have the following languages. So we can just go back to the customizer or code editor once again. And we can also add a background for that content. So we can just add a background color here. So background color, I guess. We can just give it a background color of F1, F1, F1. We can just save this. Let's open our browser or our storefront, hit refresh. Why do I keep saying browser? I'm so used to working with Node.js. So whenever I open VS Code, I open my browser. Why am I explaining? Anyway, we have the following content. There you go. So as you can see, it's just making the background F1, F1. So when we hover the localization, it should give us the following content. So let's just go back to the code editor, and the next selector or the next class that we're going to select is the drop up content. We're going to select the anchor tag, and in this selector, we'll just set its color to black. We can also set its font size to something like 16 pixels. We can also set its padding to something like 15 pixels and 10 pixels. And then we need to set its display to block, so it's not going to be inlined. So we can just save this, open your storefront, hit refresh, and if we hover the button, and there you go, as you can see now we have the English, Francais, and then the Nihongo. So we can just continue and give our content a bit of a width because it's so thin. So we can just go back to the code editor, and here in drop up content, let's just set its minimum. It's supposed to be minimum width, not height. It's supposed to be minimum width. There you go, hit save. And if we open the localization, there you go, as you can see now we have the following drop up content. Alright, so it's too small. We can just adjust the minimum width once again. Let's set it to something like 220 or 210. Hit save. I think that's too big now, but whatever. And there you go. I think that's much better. So we can just adjust the height as well, or the right or the bottom. We can set it to 100. Alright, so I think it's too high. We can just set it to 80 or 90. 90. There you go, that looks much better. Awesome. So if you want, you can also add effects to your anchor tags. So if we hover the anchor tag, it should change the background color of the anchor tag. So we can just select the same selector, drop up content, and then the anchor tag, and we're going to use the hover. And here you can just change the background color to something like F3, F3, F3. Hit save. It should change the background color of the anchor tags. There you go. I think it's working. And also, if you want to move it in the center, you can change the text align of the anchor tag. So text align and set it to something like center, and that should give you the following standard text. There you go. And that's pretty much it. I think we're almost done. If you want, you can change the localization to something else. Instead of localization, you can use the current language that the store is using. So here in the button, just change the localization to an object. Use an object, and we're going to use the form, and we're going to use the attribute called current underscore local, and then we're going to use the attribute inside of that attribute, and it should be the endonym underscore name. So it's just the same with the local endonym. And there you have it. Now we have English instead of localization, and we can change that to Francais and then the Nihongo. So we can just continue and give all of this a function. So we can just go back to the code editor, and the next thing we're going to do is to create an input field for the form localization, because we need to pass the local name to the form localization. So let's just create an input field. So input, make sure that you set its type to hidden. So hidden, and then we're going to set its name to local code. So local underscore code, and we need to set its value to the object form. So let's just select the form object, and we're going to use the current underscore local, just like before that we're using here in the button. And then we're going to use the ISO code instead of endonym name. And the reason for that is because the form only accepts the ISO code. So if you don't know locals, they do have ISO code like ISO. I don't know, I'm not familiar with locals. Apologies for that. And then you can also set its ID, because later on we're going to use JavaScript. Because later on we're going to change this value if we select or click the anchor tag. So we can just give this an ID of local code or local code. And then here we can just close this input field. And then next up, we can also set the anchor tag and change its ID, or set its ID to something like local anchor or local item. That'll make sense more. There you go. And then next up, we need to create the script. So here underneath of everything, create a script tag. So script, make sure that you close the script tag. And in this script, we're going to select all of the anchor tags in our store. As you can see, we have 3 anchor tags: English, Francais, and then Nihongo. So we need to select all of this and apply an event listener to all of this. So when we click the English, it should send the English local code, or the ISO code of the English local, to the form localization, and then the form will process that. So the form will inform, see what I did there? Inform, never mind. So the form will inform Shopify that, hey, this store is changing or is trying to change the locale of the store to a different language. And then if we click that, we need to set the value of the input field local code, name local code, to a language or to an ISO code that the store or the merchant or the customer have selected. So say for example, we selected Francais. Then that means the input field local code should change its value to the ISO code of the French or Francais. So we can just continue, and here inside of the script, we're going to use the document.getElement by ID. And in this getElement by ID, we're going to use the anchor tag. So we're going to use the local item, copy that, paste it in here. And then here we can use for each. So for each anchor tag, should be an item. This is going to be an arrow function. Make sure they end this with semicolon. And then for each item or for each anchor tag, we're going to set the item and add an event listener. So item.event listener or add event listener, and it should be click. And this is going to have a function as well, so we can just call it event. And this is going to be an arrow function. Make sure that you close this. And then instead of this add event listener, we're going to set the value of the input field to an ISO code. So we need to honestly add an attribute to our anchor tag again. So after the ID, we'll set its lang attribute. So here in the lang attribute, we're going to use the object local, and we're going to use the ISO underscore code. So we can just continue, and here inside of the add event listener, we can just use the document.getElement by ID once again. And this time we're going to select the local code input field. So local code, and we're going to change its value to the value of the length attribute of the selected anchor tag. So here we'll just use the item.get attribute. We're going to use the length. And if we honestly save this, and if we open our store, and if we open the inspect elements, alright, so we got an error. So get element by ID for each is not a function. So I think we have a problem. Should be get elements by ID, local item, and then for each. Hit save. Let's go back again. Hit refresh. Alright, this is also not working. Let's just select query selector all instead. So document query selector all. Again, document query selector all if you can't use the get elements by ID or get element by ID. And then make sure that you add number sign here, and make sure that you're using the local item, so local item ID, and hit save. We can just save that. Let's open our browser or our home page, hit refresh. And if we try to change the language or select the Francais, as you can see, the input field is changing from English to French. And if we try Japanese, there it goes, changing the value of input field to Japanese. So the next we're going to do is to send the code to the form localization. So let's just go back to the customizer or code editor. And instead of the add event listener, we're going to use the same thing. So document.get element by ID. But this time, instead of the local code, we're going to use the form localization form tag. So just type or copy the localization form tag, paste it in here. Again, localization form tag, that's the ID of the form. And make sure that you use the function submit. They'll submit the form localization. So we can just save this. Let's open our store again, hit refresh. And this time, if we change the language from English to, say, for example, Japanese, as you can see, now the page is loading, and now my URL is changed to WeeklyHow theme development.myshopify.com. And as you can see, now we have the page. So we can just open our cart page, and if we open that, as you can see, now my content is using Japanese language. And if we change our language to Francais, and there we go, as you can see, now it's saying votre paneer. And there you have it. Now we have our language switcher working. Now we can change from one language to another without using any apps. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting the like button and subscribe for more Shopify theme development related videos. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.